Thank you for joining us as well. I see that more and more people are joining us. We have started recording the meeting. And I'll try my best actually to anchor myself here in this place so you can hear me. But we'll see how that's going to work. We never done hybrid meetings before. So this is going to be our first one. Typically, we encourage people to come on site so we don't turn out into another virtual group or something. But the situation calls for it. So we're going to do hybrid meetings for a while. Okay, so I want to thank again everybody who's helping, Microsoft for providing the venue, Jeff Heighton for being our Blue Badge, John Layden, Damu, who's helping running the group, so thank all these people. And before we get started with the main presentation, so today is going to be all me presenting and talking. You guys are going to get sick and tired of me at the end, I'm pretty sure. But before I get started, I just want to go through a few news and announcements as usual. So as I mentioned, we started our in-person meetings, starting with this meeting. We are meeting at Microsoft Office in Alpharetta. Those people who are on the call, if you're in Atlanta, please just note that we started our in-person meetings and you can come and join us in the Alpharetta office of Microsoft, just like before. We require proof of vaccination, Microsoft does, to enter the office. You can go to their portal and register and upload proof of vaccination and all that stuff. And as I mentioned, for a while, we're going to be doing hybrid meetings, in person and virtual, to accommodate, people who kind of both audiences. Our official group site is Meetup. A long link out there, but if you go to Meetup and search for Atlanta BI, you'll see our group. Go ahead and register to get notified for meetings and so forth. After the meeting, spread the word, let the community know. Usually we have much bigger audience. Before COVID, we had all of these 3 rooms over there, right? Sometimes we get 60, 70 people. So we'll see if we can build that back to that crowd. But spread the word, let your coworkers know. For recordings, we are recording our meetings since we became, since COVID hit us. And the recordings are on YouTube. And this is the link where you can find all the recordings for the past 2.5 years. And if you want to get involved, we're always looking for speakers. Want to present? Let me know. Sponsors. Now that we kind of resumed our in-person meetings, we're also looking for sponsors. Sponsoring, what does that mean, John? Right? It's not a big deal. It's just buying us pizza. And the cost is we try to cap it at the $200. Would be less, but if it's more, it's going to be up to $200. That's it. So just to buy us food and drinks. If your company want to sponsor, do something for the community, let me know. In fact, I think we're looking for sponsor for our January 9 meeting, I guess. All right, we got speakers, got sponsors. If you want to share feedback, if you think there is a way to improve our group something, I'm all ears, let us know. And the last thing on the agenda here is that, does anyone have any job openings? Is anybody looking for any BI talent in the Microsoft BI space, Power BI space? People that are online, you can, I guess, unmute yourself, although maybe the audio is not, maybe you can put it in the chat window. Anybody looking for BI talent that want to advertise job opening or something? Guess not. So we'll keep on going then. Next thing, events. We have a BI SQL Saturday starting up on next year on February 25th. This is going to be all BI event. And Don, maybe you can say a few words about it.
Yeah, so this is the regular SQL Saturdays that we usually have every year. this year is going to be held at a downtown at a school called Innovation Academy. That's where it's going to be, and it's on 20th February. And there's a pre-con the day before here in this office, not there, but in his office. It's Patrick and Alex Paul are going to do the day after that, both on advanced Power BI modeling, those stuff, and visualization, Power Query, all of them. So that's paid good, and the regular SQL Saturday is a free event. Just you just charge for that. The whole day event is going to be morning, starts around 9, and then goes up all the way to 5. Multiple sessions, multiple facts. If anybody wants to present, please do. We'll go to that link, and that's a link to submit positive feedback.
So for those people that are online, just to repeat, we have Atlanta BI SQL Saturday on February 25th, but the day before on Friday, right, Dom, there's going to be pre-cons. The pre-cons are going to be in the Alpharetta office, Microsoft office here. They're not going to be in the SQL Saturday venue. Which school did you say that was?
It's called Innovation Academy.
Innovation Academy. So SQL Saturday is going to be Innovation Academy. The pre-cons are going to be actually here on Friday. And obviously it's going to be informative. Patrick is going to do it, and Alex Powers. Okay. From the CAT team. It looks like a very, very interesting presentation. The day after dashboard and a day, okay. The day after, that's interesting. Okay. So moving to what's happening in the Microsoft BI world, at least some of the things that caught my attention since the last time we met. We have paginated reports in Power BI Pro. What are the paginated reports? Does anybody know? When we say paginated report, what is that? Yes.
That's where I can customize a report and then send it back to other people.
All right, that's what you think. Anybody else? What do you guys think about paginated? Where is that?
It's like kind of the old style of report, like print on a page. Like if you want to round it, print it.
Yes. Anybody else? Paginated?
It's reporting services.
So we have a technology called SQL Server Reporting Services, which was, came along 2004. In fact, your humble correspondent got so excited about this technology. My first book was actually on reporting services. So back then we were competing with companies like Cognos, Business Objects, Crystal Reports. So Microsoft came up with the reporting services, which was a great tool, became very popular. And there are still good scenarios for using reporting services. Like, for example, in Power BI, you know that the reports are very cool, but the visualization is cut off to the whatever fits on that real estate, right? So if you have a lot of rows in a table, then you have to scroll up and down, right? So paginated reports, by contrast, they kind of expand. And if you have a long table, actually can span multiple pages, which is great if you want to print that report or if you want to export that data. So now we call reporting service reports, SRS reports, we call them paginated reports. And they used to be a premium feature in Power BI, but now it's available in all SKUs. It can be on Power BI Pro, it can be on Premium, you can be on Premium per user. You can actually deploy your old style paginated reports. So in Power BI, we have 3 types of reports. We have Power BI reports, we have Excel reports, and we have paginated reports, all of them in one place. The second thing that I have here is that we have a migration. So you guys probably know by now that when you deploy something to Power BI, when you publish a file from Power BI desktop, behind the scenes, actually, that file becomes a database in Analysis Services tabular instance that is managed by Microsoft, right? And so the Analysis Services actually now lives in 3 SKUs: on-prem in SQL Server, on Azure on our services, and also we have it in Power BI. And we discussed pros and cons in the past, but in a nutshell, it may make sense to publish your what we call semantic models, your previously known as cubes, to publish them to Power BI because you're on the latest features. In fact, we have some features that are not available in the other SKUs. So if you have semantic models and deployed to Azure and our services, now we have a kind of an automatic migration tool. So if you want to get them from there, if you want to put them to Power BI, for if you think that this will be beneficial, you can go to Power BI. You can select my form, go away. So if you go to powerbi.com, so this one, sign. Go to Power BI. I just wanted to show that real quick. So if you get it to settings here in the portal, now we have Azure on our services. Where's my mouse? Anyway, see it right there. Azure Announcer. So actually, this is the link where you're going to go to start actually migrating your models from Azure and our services to Power BI. There are, again, pros and cons for doing this. I don't have time to go through that. You know, there are some features that obviously only available in Power BI, but also there are some features like scalability, scaling out actually to multiple query replicas that are only available on Azure and our services. And actually, Microsoft has a nice document in here that I saw that actually tells you about the pros and cons. They've done very nice comparison. What is available in Power BI? What is still available in Azure and our services? So you can make an informative decision if migrating these models to Power BI actually is going to be beneficial for you.
So is it like the financial services to premium or on any school?
So on any SKU, but really premium per user or premium probably is going to be the SKUs that you want, because more than likely they're going to be larger in size, the semantic models on Azure and our services. So probably going to be running out of space on a Power BI Pro because you're limited to 1 gigabyte of size in there. Next thing on the agenda, we have a new feature in Power BI Desktop called Optimize Ribbon. So if you go to how can I get rid of this guy here? I know I didn't remove the pin and it's still showing up here, and that's really irritating. So this doesn't work. This is pin. Okay.
Pin it and unpin.
Pin it and unpin it. Okay, that's how it works.
It has like, it's like a null.
I don't see my mouse. Okay. What happened with? It's not working on the.
I think
No, it's not there. Anyway, we got to optimize menu, so unfortunately I cannot go there because I can't find my mouse. But if you go there, you will see that there's an option to prevent visuals from refreshing, which can be very useful for actually right there. You can see the ribbon. So you see that first button called Pulse Visuals. So essentially what this does, if you enable this button, you can actually make changes to your report. You can add new fields to visualizations and things like this, and then the visuals will not refresh. So how is that useful? It's very useful if you work in direct query mode. So instead of importing data, you are hitting your relational database directly, and you don't want every time you do something, actually to actually go and execute queries to refresh all the visuals, because it may take some time. So you can go, actually, you can pause the refresh of the visuals, you can add stuff to your report, and then you can enable it back. Very useful for direct query, probably not that useful for when you import data in Power BI. And also we moved the performance analyzer Microsoft did to this menu as well, the one that allows you to see how the duration of your DAX queries. They are now on this ribbon as well. Okay, and finally we have a new function, DAX evaluate log function, and I have a little demo coming up later on for that function. But essentially what this allows you to do, those of you who have experience in DAX, who have done Power BI modeling, probably agree with me that DAX could be very difficult sometimes to troubleshoot, right? Can become very complex. So this evaluate and log function essentially allows you to print output of certain DAX functions and kind of debug a complicated expression, maybe one step at a time. So later on, maybe I'll show you show a demo of that. Quickly going to the, do we have any questions online? Don't have any questions. Okay, so we can keep on going. All right, so this meeting is going to be about improving budgeting, planning, and forecasting. I'm going to do it. And the next meeting is going to be supposed to be on January 2nd, but January 2nd, it's a holiday. So we're going to do it on January 9th, where we're going to talk about Power BI and Synapse integration. Elaine Jones from 3Cloud, Microsoft partner, is going to come and do it. And we're still looking for a sponsor. So before I go to the main presentation, let me see if I can show you this evaluate and log, if I can find my mouse in here. See. I'm going to terminate this instance of Power BI desktop. We're going to reopen it again, see what happens.
Windows 11.
I don't know what it is. Usually, of course, it happens when you present. Okay, now I get it. Okay, so let's take a look and see what we've got in here. All right, let's say we have a measure, DAX measure, to do what? To calculate sales year-over-year variance. So let's go and find that measure in here. What is called sales year-over-year. All right. See what it does. What it does, it's a typical measure that does this. So what we have here is that we have a variable inside the measure that calculates the internet sales, the sales basically, for the same period but last year. So basically we're calculating, let's say if we're slicing by month, by quarter, this variable is going to calculate the sales for the same period last year. And then once we have that variable, we're going to say, all right, if the internet sales for this period is not blank, which means that if we have sales, now let's go ahead and divide the sales for this period minus the sales for the same period last year. And then we're going to divide by last year's sales, right? All right, so this expression actually is not very complicated at all, but, maybe you look at the results and they don't look good. For example, Q4 in 2011, if we are to expand this, we'll see that we have a very large number. So there could be a need for us to parse this expression and figure out where the issue is. So before this evaluate and log, my preferred approach for actually troubleshooting DAX expressions would be to use variables like what I've done here, and simply, once I have variables defined before, uncomment the last line and just return the variable. So I can break down the expression in variables. I can actually output the variable, and that will allow me, to see what's going on in that expression, maybe step by step. Now, with this function, those things maybe become a little bit easier. So what we can do, any expression, like for example, this last year sales, I can go and enclose it in this function, evaluate and log. I can type. So any output of a DAX expression actually can be, essentially you can kind of enclose it in this evaluate and log. This is great. The only problem is that we don't have a tool in Power BI Desktop that will actually print what's coming out from this expression. So to do that, we have to use either SQL Server Profiler or a tool that Microsoft wrote specifically for this purpose. So what I'm going to do, since I don't have that tool installed, I'm going to actually use the SQL Profiler. SQL Server Profiler is a tool that comes with SQL Server Management Studio. It allows you to trace activity going against analysis services or SQL Server. And because Power BI is actually analysis services for the most part, what we can do here, we can go ahead and actually launch the profiler. And when I launch it in this way, I use actually I kind of register it as an external tool. It automatically connects to the Power BI model on my desktop. So now I can go ahead and see what queries are being sent to that model. And I can see everything that is going on out there. So I'm going to pause that trace. I'm going to go here to the properties of SQL Profiler, and I'm going to enable a special event. I have to click show all events. And then I got to go and say, I got to go and find this DAX evaluation log event right here. All right. So we're looking for DAX evaluation log, a new event type for analysis that was added here. We're going to go ahead and select it. The trace has started. Everything against Power BI Desktop, this instance actually is going to be shown up there. And then what I can do here, I can go back here and I can go and re-add that measure just to make sure the query is executed. And now when I go there into the profiler, I see the output of this function. And in this case, what it does basically shows me this last year sales. So right now in the header, we can see that I'm debugging last year sales. I'm doing this over a calendar year because if you remember, my visual had actually this measure slice by date, right? And I'm at the calendar year level. And then for every year, I see the output of this expression. So that's what this function does. If you have a complex formula, you can plug it in any place in your formula, any DAX expression, DAX formula that returns actually table like this, and then you can see the output. Make sense? Questions?
Do you get penalized if you deploy it like this?
You do. This function actually was written by, there is a guy in the analysis service team called Jeffrey Wong, and he has a good blog about it. But he says that there is an overhead, quite a bit of overhead actually if you do that. So you're definitely going to be penalized. Do it only development, only testing. Once you're done, go ahead and remove it, yes. Any other questions?
Can you do this display in DAX Studio? Or?
No, that's a very good question. So the question is, can I actually trace the output in a DAX Studio? Because DAX Studio also has some tracing capabilities. I wasn't able to find this function in there. And I think also I read some blogs from the people who actually, the MVPs who do the DAX Studio, and they say about this function, they say either you do that, either use the profiler or use the tool that Jeffrey actually put together. I don't think you'll be able to do it in DAX Studio. All right. Any other questions? Let's see where we are. 7 o'clock. Time for the main presentation. Do we have any questions? Any questions online? I don't see any. I will try. Difficult to attend from Minneapolis. Yeah, okay, I got it. Okay. I'll try to be disciplined and check the chat window every now and then if you have any questions. But how about we start with the main presentation? Is that okay? It's about time.
So Teo, when you do a variable like that in DAX, does it always evaluate every input combination? And you don't really have, you just have calendar year. Is it all, it's going to reevaluate?
Everything that you have on the report. So for example, if I go ahead, let's see what's going to happen. And if I go ahead and do, so we have a calendar, let's go and do product, something from the product dimension, like the product color. So we're going to put the color in there. Let's see now what happened with our profiler. All right. The profiler, now what it did, it says that we're slicing by calendar year, we're slicing by calendar quarter, by color. And then for 20, yeah, I see. Everything, any slice you do, direct or indirect, results in a value. So it tells you for, not sure if you can see that. See if I can enhance it a little bit. So look at this in here. Basically, it tells me for 2012, for the first quarter, and the color red, this is the value. So it's going to break it down exactly how you break down the expression in the visual, and it's going to give you a row for each one of those combinations. So now I got a lot of rows in there. Make sense?
I think of a lot of Excel users. Just take the JSON expression, all that stuff in JSON, throw it into Excel, and then do all their visualizations in Excel.
Yes. Well, it's a what I call poorest man debugger. You know, the Microsoft still owes a tool to do a proper debugging index. You know, breakpoints and there and this and that. We don't have it. So this is as close as we can get right now. Poorest man debugger. Cool. Well, let's go back to the slides. See where we are, where we go. Okay, we're done with the slides. I'm going to go to the main presentation slides in here. All right, so this is going to be, I decided to break out from the typical Power BI stuff that we're doing. We're all talking about Power BI, you know, pretty much every meeting. So I hope this presentation is going to be interesting for you guys. Actually, this came from a real life study that I did, a real life project that I had. So a company, I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a moment, but a company actually approached me. I've done quite a bit of work for them, and one of the projects they had, they wanted to simplify the process of planning, budgeting, and forecasting. All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what I did, and hopefully that will inspire some interest for you guys to do similar implementations, right? So we're going to talk about planning, budgeting, and forecasting, probably very boring stuff. You know, typically this is done from finance guys, finance department. When it comes to finance, usually things are rather boring, right? So nothing exciting here. You won't see very cool visuals and stuff like that. But we're going to talk about that process. We're going to talk about traditional challenges with how the companies do planning and forecasting. And then I'm going to show you how you can create your own planning solutions, basically, to automate this. And also, I'm going to share some lessons learned from a real life project, as I mentioned. So before I continue, if you wanna download the slides, they are, because I can upload stuff on the meetup, but you can go to my website, prologika.com, and you can go to community, the community section on the menu, and then blog. And one of the first blogs that you're going to see is going to be the announcement for these meetings. So it will be right here, Atlanta MSBI and Power BI group meeting. So if you go in there in that blog, scroll all the way to the down, actually right here. Yeah, all the way to the end. You have a link to download the slides. So prologika.com, my website, go to the blog section, find that announcement, and you can download the slides from in there. Okay. Well, my favorite slide about me. So how many of you actually I haven't met before or haven't seen me before at all? Okay, so we have a few people. So for those of you, this slide's for you. All right, so my name is Teo Lachev. I'm independent BI consultant and author and mentor. And for the past 15 years, I've been helping companies of all sizes, small, medium, and very large, the size of UPS, Coca-Cola, LabCorp, and so forth, to actually help them with BI. And BI could be, so I like to call it, help them to make sense of data. And that could be organizational BI, like building data marts, data integration, semantic models. It could be a self-service BI, where most of my time is spent actually training, teaching Power BI, training people how to use it, and also kind of best practices and whatever the client wants to do. I'm actually one of the 30 plus people worldwide officially recognized by Microsoft as solution architects for Power BI. Very proud of that. And I used to be a Microsoft Data Platform MVP for 15 years. So 15 years, actually, I've been doing the same thing. And one day, Microsoft decided not to continue me anymore as the MVP. I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe I criticized them too much, or maybe it's time to retire, the old generation and get new people in there. I don't know what happened, but I'm not MVP anymore. Anyway, 50 consecutive years I was. And I founded this group 10 years ago, actually, in 2010. And I've been leading it since that date with all the people that are helping me here. Wrote a few things along the way, 14 books actually to be precise, including the 7 editions of Power BI book, the last one here. I think I'm done with writing, to be honest, at that point. I don't think I'm gonna write anything else. Or maybe I will, I don't know what's gonna happen. But I brought the 6th edition. I don't have the 7th at home. I brought the 6th. So at this meeting, I'm going to kind of see who's going to be the lucky person to get that done. All right, so the bottom line, if you need help with anything in organization and BI related, Microsoft BI, please let me know. I probably should be able to help or maybe steer in the right direction. So let's talk about first a little bit about the theory. So budgeting and planning is a part of methodology called business performance management, BPM. Some people call it corporate performance management. So this is kind of methodology that allows the company to track its performance, right? So typically you will see their KPIs, scorecards, and all that cool stuff that we know. Power BI has done some work there as well. But also a part of that process is budgeting, planning, and forecasting, which every company, mid-size and larger, probably even smaller companies, have it. So every company has a requirement to budget what they're going to sell, what they're going to do next year, and they want to track how they're doing against the budget and the forecast they created. And typically this is done by the finance department. And this is how it goes. Or at least for this company that I'm going to talk a little bit about in a moment. So toward the end of the fiscal year, so let's say now we are 2022, and let's say our fiscal year coincides with the calendar year. So toward the end, maybe October, November timeframe, finance sits together and creates a budget for next year, right? So they create a budget. And they say, this is what the performance is going to be. Let's say if we predict sales or something, this is what's going to be, for next year. So this particular company, the one from the real life project, they actually budget for 36 months in the future, not just for next year, but 3 years ahead, right? And then they budgeted, and at some point the budget gets approved. When it gets approved, it gets locked. And from that point, when you start the year, so let's say here on the second row, now we're in January, actuals start coming in. Actuals means if you sell widgets, the actual sales going to come in.
So if somebody's stuck outside, they're sending.
Somebody's stuck in. Can someone help? Yes, we got a volunteer. Go open the door. Demo, we okay. We got somebody else. So now in January, we have actuals and we can compare it against the budget, how we did. So typically they want to have a variance. They want to have a variance between actual and budget to see how we're doing against the budget. So actuals start coming in. Sorry guys on the online, I got carried away here. Actuals start coming in and we can compare them against the budget. And at some point, actually, we start creating forecasts. Forecast version 1, forecast version 2, and so forth. So we can do variance against the budget, variance against the actuals, all of that stuff. But essentially, this is how it works. Actuals eventually overtake the budgeted and the forecasted values because we have actuals. But we can do our variances against what we plan to see where we are. Make sense? Does this look like a familiar thing that maybe your company is doing? Yeah. All right. Well, it's familiar, but how is traditionally addressed? How do companies typically do budgeting and planning? They do it in Excel, right? Just like everything else. In Excel, you can do anything. Excel is very flexible. So what they do, they create spreadsheet, they ask department 1 to send them some data, department 2, or maybe if you're a bigger company, international subsidiary, this and that together, they put it, somebody massages the data, formulas. The process is very cumbersome and also very error prone. Everyone who's done Excel work know that BI and Excel don't go together very well. Security, all that stuff, of course, big problem. And the biggest problem is data integration, because when I talk to this, when I discuss this particular project, you will see that in the end, they wanted to get that data, but what they really wanted is to upload this stuff to kind of consolidate it into their profit and loss report. So the higher level management can see what is the bottom line. What is going to be their net revenue broken down by customer or something like that. So eventually, all of this stuff feeds other processes. It gets consolidated into profit and loss for high level analysis by management. And what is the solution? So when Excel doesn't work, what companies actually tend to do, they tend to actually go and buy expensive software. And the most popular software, there are different companies doing this, but the most popular one is which one you heard when you say budgeting and planning? Which product comes in mind here? Anybody? Hyperion Essbase, right? Now it's Oracle Essbase because Oracle bought it. If you go to Hyperion Essbase, Oracle Essbase, you got a plan for at least $500,000 right there. So I think the software itself is about $300,000 the last time somebody told me. But then you've got consulting fees on top of that. So actually this could become a multi-million-dollar project easily, right? But Hyperion Essbase and analysis services are very similar, very similar technologies. In fact, you may remember, has anyone have any experience with analysis services for designing cubes, OLED cubes? Has anyone done this in the past? Back in the old days. You've done it? MDX. You guys know MDX. But back in the day when we were learning MDX, there was a book called Solutions with MDX, written by Chris Webb and other people. And the title was saying, So MDX solutions with Hyperion base and analysis services. Because these two technologies were so similar, both of them were designed actually to allow you to create cubes, and they have the same language. You can use MDX. Both of them support MDX as a language to query them. So unfortunately, Hyperion base did not become very popular. Analysis service kind of overshadowed it for general cube development. But what remained from S-base was this planning, budgeting and planning, and S-base actually is de facto standard for software, for budgeting software. So this company wanted to do it their own way. I'm sure that they reached out to Hyperion, they saw what they're looking for, and eventually, who's going to do it? Teo is going to do it. Teo is going to do implementation of Hyperion S-base right there, which actually turned out to be a very fun project. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what this company wanted to do. This company is called Brightstar. They're actually here in Alpharetta. They are an insurance company, but insurance with a special kick. What they insure is mobile devices. So if you go and buy a mobile phone from Sprint or some other vendors, more than likely they're gonna show you they want to sell you insurance, right? To cover the device in case it gets stolen or damaged. So that insurance, one of the insurance companies is Brightstar. So they in the insurance business, they insure devices like this, and their customers are companies like Sprint, right? Sprint, in fact, was one of their biggest clients. And then for each client, they had what they call service plans. So for example, service plans are what that plan is going to cost the customer. So $4 per month, $5 per month. So their requirement was to do budgeting and forecasting at the customer and service plan level. That's the granularity of the forecasting. So initially we started with what we call operational budgeting and forecasting, and the story went like this. They already had a data warehouse, but you don't have to. You don't have to have a data model, data warehouse to do that solution. But they did, which kind of helped because the data is kind of already kind of consolidated in one place. So the way this went is that from the data warehouse, this is where the actuals are coming from. They go into a cube called budgeting operations. And then in that cube, we're going to do the budgeting and forecasting. I'm going to show you a demo how that works from an end user standpoint in a moment. But also what happened later down the cycle, they wanted to do also budgeting and forecasting on what we call SGA accounts. SGA stands for sales, general, and administrative, also called statistics account. And their system was Workday. This is where they will track salary and bonuses of their employees. So they wanted to forecast and budget for that because people get promoted, people leave the company. So that was important too. So that also was fed into the data warehouse. There is another cube. The reason why we have another cube in here is because that data was very secure, right? As you imagine, only certain people in the company can actually see salary information. So for security reasons, we break off this cube into a separate cube. So budgeting here, but at the end, out of all of that budgeting stuff, what actually needed to happen was to fill to kind of produce a profit and loss statement with actuals and budget, so management can see the bottom line net revenue by customer, and they can monitor it month by month to see where the things are going. So that's the big picture of all of these processes. And each line here corresponds to what? Corresponds to data integration. So we had to write ETL processes to move that data from one place to another place. So it wasn't very simple, from architectural standpoint. But the engine, the most important thing was the budgeting and forecasting engine. And speaking of that, let me show you how the things worked from a customer, from a planner standpoint. So imagine somebody in the finance department. They want to do budgeting. What tool they're going to use? They're going to use Excel, but they're not going to do any formulas anymore. That Excel doesn't have any formulas. It's just the front end to the cube where the engine is to do this forecast. But let's see how the things work from a planner standpoint. All right, so they're going to get a spreadsheet like that, and they will select the planning year right here at the top. We've got planning year. They will select it. There are dimensions. There are measures. So right here, we're seeing that here on the left side, they have selected one client, C-Spire. All right, and they expanded that all the way to the service plans because, again, in their requirement, budgeting and forecasting was done at the service plan level. Service plan, think of like a product for each one of their customers. All right, so here we are seeing that we have actual. So on columns, we have the so-called scenario dimension, and that scenario dimension allows us to do what? Allows them to select a particular version, because even budget can have multiple versions, and then forecast we have to be able to support up to 9 versions or something like that. So they can select what they want to see on columns. So in this case, I have selected actual. I have selected budget version 1. So we're seeing the actual, and if we scroll, the budget starts right here. So we have actuals in this case up to this date. We have actuals all the way to April, and then starting from May, we don't have actuals anymore, but we have budget data. What makes the things very interesting for this company is that when you start, let's say you start for next year, budgeting for next year, right? And you want to populate your budget. So there are different ways to do it. But what they wanted to do, they wanted to have different rules. So, for example, the default rule was average of 3 months, meaning that instead of somebody going and typing the data in from January to December next year, they will select a default rule, and that rule will compute the average of the previous 3 months. So for example, if you look at this May 2018 value of $304, and if we look at the previous 3 months in here, the average right here is 304, right? But then when we go to the next value in June, now we have 2 months of actual, 1 month of budget. Well, that value is going to actually average these 3 values. So the average of this 3 will be now 298, and the value is 298. And so that was the default rule. They also had a 6-month average. They also had seasonality to adjust things depending on the season, because the business was seasonal. And finally, they had a rule where they say, oh, if we want to overwrite that data, that number explicitly, meaning that they type it in, there should be a way to do it. So this is what we had to support: rules and explicit data entry. So let's see how that's going to work. So let's say this is all pre-populated. They haven't done any manual entry, but they see some value here, maybe in June 2018, and they want to change it. They want to overwrite it. So the way this will work is that for every, and the other thing is that there are measures in the cube, such as gross adds. Gross adds is how many new subscribers they have added to that plan. Some of these measures can be changed. So if the measure could be changed, it will be shown in blue. So we call these measures drivers, because those measures, if you change them, they compute everything else. It's like an avalanche. You change the value, all the measures recomputed with that new value on the fly, right? So we call them drivers. So if you see a measure in blue, that means that this measure actually can be changed. So let's say they want to change this June 2018 value.
So what was the backend support?
I will come to this in a moment. I will, one step at a time. I just wanted to show you first the user perspective, how that's going to work. And then I'm going to show you the technology behind it. All right, so they will go to the rules in here, and they're going to drag this growth. So for every driver, there is a rule, corresponding rule measure. So if the rule, we come up with some convention. We say if there is no rule, that means the default rule is going to be applied, which is the 3-month average. So we had empty or 0 for 3 months, 1 for something else. Anything else you specify in that rule basically means that you can change the data directly. So for example, if I come in here and if I can say, all right, I want to change that cell. So I'm going to put any value besides this 3 value. When I do that, the value automatically disappears. So now what I can do, I can go ahead and override this value. And then now, when we look at this new value, everything else should get pre-computed. So this now July value, which is still with the default rule, should be the 3-month average of this values, including the one that I changed. And indeed, the average is $290. And as you can see, everything else gets recomputed once you change a driver, right? And so they will make changes, they will publish the changes, and from that point, things are gonna go, other process is gonna take care of that data. But that's in a nutshell how the process works. Any questions about this? Yes?
Do they have any concern in terms of number of sales days per month? Because sometimes it's 20 days, sometimes 25, depending on all days. So when they do this moving average,
They did not. Luckily, we didn't have to go there. But so the question was, sometimes we have months have different numbers of days, like February has 28. Did we need to account for this? We didn't have to. Basically, the rule was by default, we're going to do a 3-month average with the ability for the planner actually to override this value, the values.
So as the question was, what is the backend? Because he didn't write this data back to the analysis queue.
We did actually. So we're going to talk about this in a moment. So we're going to go a little bit now. Apparently, there is a lot of interest about how that works behind. So the bottom line here is that we still use Excel as a front end. But if I click on any value, you don't see any formulas anymore. You just see the value. So there are no formulas. And everything, because of the beauty of how cubes work, when I make change in the lowest level, everything gets rolled up and it gets recalculated. So that's why, we decided to use analysis services. Okay, how many of you know about analysis services? How many of you know that analysis services have actually 2 technologies? Multidimensional, which is the old one for all cubes, and something called tabular, which is the one that Power BI uses. Do you guys know that? Kind of. Which technologies do you think we use for this? Tabular? Can Tabular do right back? Can you use Tabular to change the values in the cube, in the model? Can you do that?
Query to go around the database and refresh the tab.
Very nice. So he was saying, the question was, can we change the data? The answer is that out-of-the-box Tabular does not allow you to do that, but you can do workarounds, right? There are tools like forms. You can build some user interface to go and change the database and then go and reprocess it. So probably can get around it. What about recursive calculation? So remember, one of the requirements here is that the default 3-month average rule will require evaluating the previous. So that means the measure has to go back to itself, what we call recursive calculation. Has to go and find the values for the previous 3 months and average those. Can DAX do that? Can DAX allow us to write recursive calculations where you say measure A equals to measure A plus something? Can you do that in DAX?
Not dynamic.
or dynamically, cannot, right? So initially, in fact, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to use tabular because we would love to use tabular. You know, it's a memory model, much faster. All the effort goes into it by Microsoft, but we couldn't. Also, another thing, you know, the requirement of, I mean, there were other complexities here that will require something called scope assignments in multidimensional, the ability to change part of the cube space using formulas. And maybe I'm probably getting too technical here. Maybe I can show an example of that. But tabular, that was another thing tabular did not have. So eventually we said, the heck with tabular, we're going to go with multidimensional. So this is one example where in the past, maybe 5 years, 6 years, 90+% of everything that I do is using tabular, right? But this is one example where multidimensional for us made more sense to do it. So essentially we use multidimensional. So the architecture went like this. Everything was fed into a data warehouse. Again, you don't have to have a data warehouse to build a solution, but again, in their case, they had one anyway. And so we had 2 cubes. As I mentioned, one for operational budgeting and one for salaries. So there were 2 multidimensional cubes. And then we use Excel as a front end. So how did that work? I mean, from a configuration standpoint, I'm going to go and open a Visual Studio. So this way it gets technical. And if you guys don't know about multidimensional programming, don't worry about this part of the presentation. But eventually, I just wanted to show you what the model looked like first. So this is what the schema looked like to support the planning solution for the operational reporting. So we had a fact table, very simple actually. We had a fact table for where the actuals go and where the budget data go, and that's sliced by date, by client, customer, by scenario. Scenario, this is the budget and forecast that I showed you before. Don't worry about this guy here, the operations stage, and by planning year. Planning year is the one that allows you to select which planning year you're going to be working on. Is it 2018, 2019, and so forth, right? So that was the schema, very, very simple star schema actually in here. And the beauty about multidimensional is that if we take a look at this partitions in here, you will see that the nothing works today. I promise you that, you know, first meeting after 2 years and a half, nothing is going to work. Teo has forgotten how to present. So we see that in multidimensional, we have a ability to do write back partitions. And so when you create a write back partition, now service automatically creates the table for you. Write back partition from aggregation standpoint can only have some. So everything you do around planning and forecasting, when you do actually the writing back to the cube, the measure needs to sum up. There are no other aggregation functions that write back partitions support. That sounds like a limitation, but you can have formulas on top of that you can do whatever you want, like 3-month average that we had to do. But in a nutshell, in the lowest level, the only supported function is sum. So we have a write back partition on the planning operations fact table. And once we do that, once we configure it, then analysis basically is configured to write back. The only thing left to do, other than implementing the solution and all the magic that happens with these formulas, is to go to Excel. And once you connect Excel to a multidimensional cube, you're going to get this pivot table analyze menu. And in the pivot table analyze menu, you have an all app tools ribbon. So here in the ribbon, we have that nice all app tools stuff. And we go to the all app tools. We have what if analysis. look at that. So what if I enable, sorry. Yeah, my mouse is, okay. If I have a basically Excel connected to a cube and the cube is configured for write back, I can go ahead and enable what if analysis. And what if analysis, once I enable it, I can, it allows me to change the cube data, basically. It allows me to change the cube. What about if I made a mistake here? What about if the planner has made a mistake? Well, all of this is handled by Excel. So we have additional, where is the, what if analysis? Okay, you can discard changes. If you're happy with the changes, you can go ahead and actually publish them. And when you publish them, they actually, this is where the changes actually get written to that database, to that table, right? So, you know, you can play with the data. The things are going to get recalculated, but the changes are not going to be published until we specifically publish them, specifically commit them to the underlying database. And that happens with this publish. In real life, actually, we move this menu here. You can create an Excel shortcut, so it's kind of convenient for the planner to go and click all those things. But that's how it works, basically. All right, so Excel configured for what if analysis, analysis configured for write back with a write back partition. And then you gotta write code. You gotta write tons of code in this case. Actually, it wasn't that much. Most of it, I just have to show you a little bit of what we had to do. This is where all the formulas are basically centralized, which is another good thing about this solution, because as I mentioned, there is nothing in Excel. Excel is just the front end. All the formulas, all the rules, they are done in this script. There are many measures in here because their requirements were like this. They wanted to see a lot of measures. So a lot of this MDX code was written in there. And this is all where the actual rules and formulas went into. They went into the cube. Questions? Yep.
Can you edit at the top level?
Can you?
Edit at the top level. So today you're editing specific plan or item.
So the question here, can you edit at the top level? Yes. The short answer is yes. In fact, if I go here to this all app tools, and if I go to what if analysis, and if I go to settings, this is where you specify how, if you are to write at the higher level, like for example, if I want to change the data at the customer level, not at the service plan level, I can do that. And then here it specifies how the cube is going to allocate the changes back to the lowest level, because the cube, whatever you do, you can change the value at the super high level, but it has to go all the way down to the granularity, which is the service plan.
So I have a follow-up question. So in that case, what happened with the write back partition? I'm not an expert in MTX, but would you, like, I know the write back would have but every update, it translates into a delete and insert, right? In the write back.
It's never deleted. It's always inserted. So what happens is that the cube writes the delta. So imagine the initial value is 100. You change it to 101.
Yes.
What's going to happen in the cube is going to write 1, because when it aggregates the data, it's going to get the old value, it's going to get all the deltas, all the changes down to that cell, is going to roll it up.
So if you do lots of changes at the top level, the write back and
The write back is
so big.
That's
How do you do with that? You just like compress it every now and then, like aggregate it.
There is nothing you can do. This partition is out of reach for you. You know, this is something that an analysis service actually manages by itself. So you're not supposed actually to go and change it. But you brought a good point. You have to be aware about it. Now, Cube is designed to aggregate massive data to roll up data efficiently. But you're right. I mean, eventually there could be many, many changes. In fact, one of the best practices that I have later on is that instead of changing one value and publishing and changing another value and publishing, which is going to result in 2 rows in the cube, to do a lot of changes and then you publish. We never actually had problem with the performance of the write back partition. We had other performance issues that I'm going to talk about in a moment, not particularly with the write back. And eventually, I mean, the planners, I really don't know in your company how many changes they're going to make. But for this particular client, they won't actually make a lot of changes. You know, they will just live with the default 3-month average, which is pretty much it's done by default. And they will make changes here and there, a little bit of adjustments. So the amount of write back changes were not that high in this particular case.
What's the question? What's the scale? Like how many products are involved? How many?
So for this particular case, they had like 50 customers, and every customer had on average, like maybe, if I remember, 7, 8, 9 plans. So we're talking about, what is it, like maybe 500, something like this, customers and service plans, yes. But that's later on when I talk about performance lessons learned, I'm gonna mention this. We're gonna revisit this again.
What about the number of levels? Sorry.
It was already answered.
What is that?
I'm good.
You
What
good?
about the number of levels? Like you talked about the high level, low level. What's the number of levels in between? 2, 3, 4?
So when you say the question is, what is the number of levels? You mean like dimension level, like your customer service plan?
Customer groups, how many customer groups?
It's really up to you, whatever you design it. This is just like a cube, like any cube. So if you want to have a hierarchy, you know, customer group or something like this, you can go whatever level you want to go deep. You know,
levels.
no, there is no limit on the level, but it goes back to what he was asking. At what level then you want to go and do the write back? Do you want to do, ideally would like to go at the lowest level of the hierarchy, because if you go to highest level, then the cube is going to push down, is going to kind of recalculate all the way down to the lowest level. So you're going to end up with a lot of changes in the write back table, which you really have to test, you know, how that's going to work. In our case, it was very simple, yeah.
Assuming that you are making these changes to reach final budget, is there a point where can you reprocess the cube and bring the write back data back into the main?
Oh, yeah. So what we had to do, so the question is, at some point, you know, you do the write back, can you go and bring the data back to the cube? This is what we had to do, because to create, let's say, version 2 of budget, you don't want to start again from the blank slate. You want to get version 1, you want to copy it over to version 2, and then start from there. And that copy over to version 2 was done by ETL process that will get the data, will send MDX query to get this budget and actuals the way they're saved in the cube. And then it's going to materialize it, is going to copy it over to the next version with the default rule of, let's say, -1, which means that explicit values are now in the database. So let's say, again, I'm not sure if you, just to clarify this, let's say they made only one change in here to June. They publish it, right? So now we started working on budget version 2. Well, we need to get a budget version 1. So for every customer and plan, we're going to execute a massive MDX query. We're going to get these values. We're going to save them into a budget version 2. But because now they're explicit values, we're going to save them with a rule of -1, meaning that -1, meaning that the values are explicit. They are pretty much given. They're not pre-calculated. And then they can go back and change it to whatever rule they want to enable this automatic functionality if they want for specific cells. So there was a lot of ETL written also, but that was the nature of the beast. You know, have to move from one version to another version. You gotta save those things. There was a lot of movement, and that was done with ETL processes.
But at that point, version 2, the write back buffer at the end.
Version 2, yes, for version 2, so all the versions, eventually they write to the same write back partition, but you're absolutely right. I mean, in this case, once I start with version 2, there won't be any write back changes for that version. Once you make a change, then there's going to be a write back change for that version.
Okay, but so for version 1, the write back changes are still there.
Yes, of
They're
course.
just in version 1. but they're still in the.
They're still there because otherwise you won't be able to roll up. So whatever write back changes you made, they're always there. Unless you decide to purge, let's say you want to retain 5 years of planning, then you can go and actually remove the data.
Who's orchestrating that, let's say, the data moves, right? Like taking the snapshot, like, is it like IT, so like the business people?
There was a button in Excel in the actual template. There was a button when the user will press. There was one big button. Behind that big button, the IT actually is going to go and move the data. It's going to kick a stop procedure. The stop procedure is going to kick SSIS job. SSIS job is going to do the movement. So I hope you guys online, you are able to follow. I don't see any questions. Okay, so let's see what else we got in here. So we talk about the architecture, pretty straightforward. Okay. So what was the benefit for the customer in this case? We have a automated retrieval of actuals from the company data warehouse, which I helped them to design as well. Highly customized solution that meets complex business needs. Elimination of manual entry and data errors because there are no more formulas in Excel. Automated consolidation. Management had immediate access. Immediate access means that once you change the data, once you do a change, I mean, that's what the cube does. The management can go and see that at any level. You know, the cube, the only thing that it has to do is kind of roll up, which is what the cube is designed to do. So there is no need for, well, in our case, actually, the things were more complicated because things have to be moved from one place to another. Again, going back to the scenario, I mean, the some of this data movement thing that we need to do. In essence, the write back is very simple by itself. You just need to do it. But we had to move the workday, had to get the operations, we had to go and move it to a profit and loss. So all of this, as I mentioned, every line you see, that will require data integration process. That will require what we call ETL to do that for every line. So just because of the specific of that project, there was a additional effort. But to answer your question on the Excel spreadsheet, from a planner standpoint, there will be a button. If they want to save it to another version, they click the button, they do that, a job runs. If they want to go and move it from operational to profit and loss, there is another button for it. So buttons in Excel.
How many consultants were there?
Just one.
Less than the IT.
Let's do the computer. It was only me, actually. They helped quite a bit. They helped with the ETL process in this case. So these jobs were done by them, really, but it wasn't that difficult, to be honest with you. The most difficult thing was the actual engine, the Hyperion stuff, the planning, the budgeting stuff.
Like how long was the project?
So the project went through a few iterations. Initially, we started with the operational reporting, operational budgeting and forecasting. I think that went for about 3 months or something like that, followed by another 2 months or something just to build additional layers on top of that.
The write back sheets, do they recognize like row level security or
Yes,
user?
they do.
roles?
That's another beauty because it's a cube. You can secure it. You can,
So the boss can't go in and change the sales budget.
if they don't have permissions, no. But the salary cube was the one that presented a challenge because even the database administrator on the machine, even the Windows administrator, wasn't supposed to gain entry to that cube. So that required encryption. In fact, I a little bit vague on the details what we did there actually to secure that. But it was highly secure cube, the most secure cube that I ever seen. So that one actually was challenging from security standpoint. How to prevent access from Windows administrators. And in our services, there is a feature that is actually a setting called built-in admins or on services admins. So actually there's a setting on the cube. I think one thing that we have to do is to turn this thing off so they don't get access to the cube. And from that point, I think we had to do some other stuff.
This is a mix of on-prem.
Everything was on-prem in there. This was
SSIS packages for DPL.
SSIS packages because that's what they use. But this solution, you can obviously easily move it to the cloud. The database itself could be Azure SQL database. I don't see any problems with that. Analysis multidimensional though is not available as a platform as a service offering. So it has to be running on a VM. Other than that, you can use Azure Data Factory. You can use the Azure SQL database for the backend. Only analysis multidimensional is not available as a platform as a service. So you would have to run it on the VM.
It's all service.
Because it was considered as a legacy technology, all the interest went to Tabular, which is the Power BI. So Microsoft said, heck, why would you build multidimensional if not many people are using it anymore? So now materialized.
Can you get Essbase with the platform as a service?
I don't know if Oracle does it as a platform as a service. Check it, Oracle Essbase. I'm pretty sure they run it on the VM. I don't think they made it to the cloud.
They bought 3 of them, like 10 years ago. I don't think it's quite powerful. They go for Essbase.
Okay, a question from the online group. Is the write-back feature supported by desktop app for Excel, or is it supported even by the cloud app for Excel through a browser? So I don't think, I have to check, but I don't, so by cloud app, he means probably Excel online. So when you go to Excel and render an Excel spreadsheet, it renders in HTML. That's probably what he means by cloud app. I don't think I'm gonna find a write back in there. I have to check. So in this particular case, it's they use the desktop version of Excel. In other words, can I host this Excel file on OneDrive SharePoint and have users access it to make change to the scenario? Oh yeah, I mean, if you can put this template on OneDrive or a network drive, as long as they open it with Excel for desktop, they download it and open it for Excel with Excel desktop, then you're going to be fine. But if they render it online, I don't think you're going to have write back in there. I got to check. I'm pretty sure that you won't.
The Power App.
Yeah, the Power Apps, you have to write tons of code though. So that's the other thing. So if you look at some of the solutions they have for planning, they actually use Tabular, they use Power BI. In fact, there are Power BI solutions for planning. And the way they get around it, around write back, because Tabular doesn't support it, they have their own user interface that writes back to the database, processes, refreshes the queue. So you can do things like this, but why would you if Excel actually natively supports it? Okay, so let's see. Oh, we have plenty of time. All right. All right, so a little bit about lesson learned from this solution. For the most part, everything went very well actually with this project. I really enjoyed this particular one. Actually, it was a bit of a challenge. The biggest challenge was the performance. And the reason why performance was a challenge is because of this recursive calculations. Remember the 3-month average calculation that computes, that requires actually the measure to call back to itself? Well, that one turned out to be not performing very well. So I don't want to go into too much technical details, but in our services, we have 2 modes of computation, both in tabular and multidimensional. The first one is called block computation, and the second one is cell-by-cell computation. Ideally, for your formulas, whatever you do, you want to have a block computation, which is like a set in SQL Server. It's super fast. It's very fast. But in some cases, like recursive calculations, it's not possible to do that. So you have to do calculations cell by cell. So initially, the way this project started was that they wanted to do a forecasting at the customer level, which wasn't bad because you had 50 customers. Then they lowered the grain to service plan level. So now we have a bigger estate. to work with. So when you roll all of this up across all, so imagine you're a high-level manager. You go, you want to see the bottom number. You don't care about service plans, don't care about customers. You want to see net revenue, as one liner and maybe slice it by customer. For that to work, basically, everything has to be rolled up. All of this sales needs to be recalculated. So we had a challenge in there. So we worked with Microsoft, with the Microsoft Analysis Services team, and they gave us some guidance. There are some settings that we had to turn on into the analysis services itself to make this faster. And eventually we got it to a point where it actually was good from performance standpoint. So the first lesson that we learned is that, and something that I want to share with you if you want to go that path, is to avoid too granular forecasting. Granular meaning, I don't know how many products you have, how many customers you have, but ideally you want to do this planning at the high level so you don't have kind of a big dimensions. You don't have like 100 customers and 5,000 products or something like this. There'll be a lot of competition. Now for you, if you don't go to this average, this recursive calculations, I really don't know what your requirements are, but if you don't need recursive computations, then everything should be very, very fast. The moment you introduce recursive calculations, the measure falls back on itself. This is where the performance actually may become an issue. So recursive calculations are expensive. The higher you keep the forecasting and budgeting at, meaning at customer level or maybe product category, the better off you're going to be. Right back, we did it at the lowest level, and that's for the same reason that you ask. Analysis allows you to do right back at the high level, let's say the customer, and then you can actually specify different rules for computing, for breaking down the measure to the lowest level. The default is equal allocation. So analysis is going to say, all right, you enter 100 at the high level. There are 5 service plans. I'm going to divide 100 by 5, 20. I'm going to put 20 for every, I'm going to write 20 for every service plan. I'm going to insert 5 basically rows in the table. You can also specify weighted averages. So you can actually have an MDX function that tells you how to allocate. But luckily, we didn't have to do it. We said we're going to do a planning at the lowest level, which is the service plan in this case, so we don't have to worry about allocations. So about actually allocations. And as I mentioned, from a performance standpoint, it makes sense to train the planner to do multiple changes instead of doing one change, publishing, another change, publishing, because each one of those changes will insert a row in the right back table. So it makes sense actually to teach them to do multiple changes at once. Well, any other questions? Anything else about this? Because I'm about to write up and we have plenty of time. If you want to talk about something else,
So in the forecasting budgeting examples we have to deal with, a lot of time there's obviously the financial plan, there's the sales plan, there's the operation. In terms of the forecasting, only like to see all these 3 months. Because as you can see here, the input is probably from the financial.
Sure.
If you've got salespeople who may provide sales, you have operation people providing purchase. So did that come up in terms of how can we get in organizations, multiple functions?
Absolutely. I mean, that's actually what we did in our case, we had 2 subject areas, which is the operational reporting. We had actually 3 subject areas: operational reporting, salaries, and the other one was the financial. Because on the PLL, they also had to specify drivers to different scenarios. But in your case, if you have different areas, so you have operations, you have sales, you're going to model probably what you're going to do. You're going to end up with multiple fact tables. So if I go back to this plan in here, to this schema, and that schema, by the way, is just for the operations. If I go to financials, that's a separate fact table. So what that means is that there's going to be a fact table for operations. There's going to be a fact table for sales.
Right.
So you're going to model this just like you model a Power BI model, basically with dimensions and fact tables. and then you're going to enable write back on each one of these tables. And because they're joined by common dimensions, then, they're just going to roll up, when you slice and dice. This is just cube. This is straight cube, nothing fancy.
Last question. So consumer packages company, it's not the usual 50,000, 40,000 customers. I think this methodology can handle this large number of.
So again, from a performance standpoint, absolutely. This cube, the old style cube, they were designed, 20, 30 years ago when memory was scarce. So they kind of disk-based, but they're designed for a lot of data. In my project, some of my projects in the past, we had a cubes with built on top of kind of terabyte data warehouse. So the cubes itself, they can do roll out very efficiently. The only concern there is this recursive calculation, because this is something that unfortunately it's not very efficient. A measure to call back in itself. If you can avoid that, or maybe keep it to a minimum, then maybe it will work better. You really have to test it here. I don't want to.
Because in my mind, it's not only the recursive, also the what ifs. I'm working on the system, say increase by 2%, 5%. And you want to see the results coming back to me, understanding.
Sure. So I don't think we have a feature like increase by 2%. I think Excel, I didn't have to use it, but I think Excel has a what if analysis that allows you to do that. I don't know how efficient it's going to be. For us was pretty much, just data entry on the.
Potentially you could also basically offload this into the source tables in SQL and basically go by calculated columns.
Calculated columns in which case?
In case you're trying to do, because you're doing this dimension based, so you have your fact tables that roll up into the dimensions, and sure, eventually you could add columns to your fact tables and potentially do business logic there.
You can, but this thing's a runtime, this recursive calculation. Sure. There is no way for you to materialize it, because if you change a single value, imagine they change for one value, everything needs to recompute. Everything, horizontally, vertically. So every change everything has to be dynamic. So materializing stuff in the database probably is not going to do any good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see it.
Think of it like Excel. Think of like you have Excel spreadsheet, you have formulas for every cell. You change one cell, the whole thing is to recompute, right? Same thing here. Yeah. So materializing stuff, unfortunately, I don't think is going to give you much benefit. Okay. Let's see if we have any questions. Don't. All right. Anything else? So this meeting is supposed to go until 8:15 at least. Anything else that you want to ask me for this solution or yeah?
I think the real issue with a granularity of 2 billion unique identifiers. You've got 50,000 customers buying 40,000 SKUs. I've been there, done that. You don't necessarily want to forecast at the SKU level, right?
Exactly.
You can't really consolidate 2 billion.
Yeah.
So
see, here's the challenge. You're absolutely right. You do want to forecast the higher level, the better. But then when you go to manufacturing base, you're producing products. Sure. A high level forecast doesn't help. You need to have a product that's the new level forecast by location. To drive the machine.
I see.
So a lot of time what they do, they aggregate the forecast, but then somehow they come up with a math to break up that forecast to the SKU.
I see.
So the process can occur on the supply side, not on the demand side. Okay? And the question is, how can you do it all in one place? Because so there's no one's making an assumption to go from a high.
Yeah.
Well, the budget side is very different from.
Well,
you don't schedule runs 3 years out, right? They don't really care. We don't know that we're going to run, a 9-inch plate in December of 2024, right? We know what we're going to run in the next week, right. And that's a very different.
What about the quarterly forecast?
Even quarterly, you do it. At least we did.
No, definitely. The finance always is at the higher level. But the question is, how do you align the financial forecast with what's happening on the shop floor?
So what you're saying at the shop, at the floor right now, they forecast for every SKU. And how many SKUs do you have?
I've seen 50,000, 100,000.
50,000. So how they can physically manage that many SKUs? How many people are doing this?
Trust me.
They have, they entry people.
I mean, these are $4 or $5 billion customers. I don't know. That's, but they may have 4 or 5 people on the planning side. But the reality is they're purchasing goods for these 50,000 that's used it, running machines, planning labor for the 50,000 SKUs. And always you want to align this operational plan with the financial.
Yeah, I mean, the operation.
I think that on a normal day, you can do things at the high level and use like your history and say, well, that's gonna be the nice spread of the product. However, during COVID, for example, like you're hit by a certain commodity that's not available. So everybody's screaming to say, which SKUs are impacted by this commodity and what's gonna be the impact on my company. Again, you want to do that exercise on every day, but then once a year, once a quarter, when you have these crunches, that's where you have to go down, even on the budgeting side, also SKU level.
Yes. In the 50,000 SKU environment, what we've done also is the ABC analysis, runners, ventures, reviews. Basically, of the 50,000, there's 1,000 SKUs that made up maybe 80% of the sales.
Sure.
So you kind of have to look at this. And the other 20 is really what we handle it.
How do you use it? How do you do it today? Do you use any software to do the planning?
For example, those are the things, SAP environment, for example, right? Order-based planning is what we call it.
Nothing big, right?
No.
It's not like something.
Yeah.
Like, so he mentioned at the beginning, like, if you have to spend the millions to get these systems.
Absolutely. That's why I was asking how scalable that is. Because obviously this is a much quicker solution and it's much better, but there's going to be a trade-off.
Or you can do a hybrid. You can use SAP
exactly.
for lowest level planning, the inventory planning and stuff like this. And you can use that for the financial planning, basically.
Right.
So you have to test it. You have to prototype it from a performance standpoint. The technology can roll up things efficiently, but recursive calculations that I mentioned can really throw a wrench to.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so my follow-up question were now, how often do they actually do they make changes? Because you offered, I think it was 9 different budget levels.
9, up to 9 versions is what they
So-
wanted to
so
support
now,
us.
I figure after the implementation, the business eventually settles maybe on one budget level they're typically using on a day-by-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Are they still on an ongoing basis, are they still using more than one version?
They use more because what they do every month, if I remember, or every couple of months, they actually save the old forecast version. They create a new one so they can do variances between between different versions, so they can see how accurate they are. So that button in Excel that I talked about, they can click it at any time. They can create a version. They can save it as a new version, and that happens a few times through the year. Absolutely.
Okay.
They treat forecasting and budgeting different. I mean, they have different.
In a nutshell, it's the same thing. Budget is supposed to be once it's done. You can go, let's say you start in October, go version 1, it's not approved. You freeze it, go version 2. By the end of the year, you should be done with budget. Budget should be locked at that point. You cannot change it. That's another thing we had to do, locking. So they cannot change it, basically how there was additional stuff that we had to do for this. But, and then once the budget is locked, then the forecast starts and the forecast continues through the year until October, maybe, where the things are clear, what's going to happen, and then budgeting for next year starts. Or they can overlap, basically, that's fine.
So they have a month.
They have a monthly forecast, yes. Any other questions? Anything else you want to ask me? Power BI, Microsoft BI, anything else to get you the most value out of this rain and effort you put here to come for 2 hours? Any questions from you guys from the online audience?
Any news on certification from in terms of BI?
I don't follow them. I think I'm done with certifications, to be honest with you.
Well, I was thinking in terms of your gold partner level, right, the X number of certified people.
Yeah, I do.
Anything new there?
Nothing that I heard of, nothing. They changed the certifications. I know I had to renew the data. What was it, Damo? The 2 or 3, what is that, solution expert for data engineering. So every time, the good thing though is that when you take an exam, if you have to renew it, you can do it online. You can do it without going to actually take the exam. So renewing is very easy. But as far as recertification, I haven't heard anything about it, any big news. So before I forget, I want to actually raffle the book. So, where is the, yeah, thank you so much. If you can do that, I gotta get the sign-in sheet. That'll be helpful. Yeah. Yes.
Just an announcement, group. The Georgia Developers Association has made a call for speakers. They are doing a cloud symposium.
Okay, which group was that again?
So it's the Georgia Developers Association.
Georgia Developer Association.
I'll post it on the meetup.
Please put it on the meetup.
And it's a great time for people if they're thinking of speaking. Get a chance to speak. Interested in learning. They hope it was fun.
Okay. Thank you for sharing this. When is going to be that? What date?
I think it's March 20. I think it's 23rd, if I remember correctly.
Last chance for you guys to get here. That's anybody wants to add? We have 13 people. I think we have more. Maybe we have 13. Few more. Anybody else sign? The sign-in sheet.
Take notes.
Okay. It looks like we don't have any questions from the audience.
No fun doing that. Worry about the email address, right?
So was that interesting to you guys? Just want to get something
Yeah,
done? Well,
It's going to have an application in mind, right? Not just general purpose, like just like very targeted. Sit down.
yes. All right, I'm gonna put 14 in here. All right. The winner is Troy. Troy, don't worry.
Make sure your contact.
Where's Troy?
Here's Troy.
Troy, there we go. Hope you enjoyed.
I will.
People going down. All right, guys. Well, if we don't have any other questions, so I mean, I'm gonna be here for 15 more minutes or so. If you have any questions, you can come and ask me. Other than that, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you next year. Sometimes.
Not the party this year, huh?
I don't know. Do you know anything about Prologika?
I don't think they, I mean, if we didn't talk about it, we're not having one. Yeah, the database group hasn't started meeting in person yet.
Really?
Yeah.
Who's heading that group now?
Hey, Reed.
Who?
Reed, Irene.
Oh, really?
American, whatever.
Doesn't she work for Microsoft?
Yeah, she works for
Okay.
And then it's still, it's always been it's been an issue to me. I mean, Don's still around, he's retired, but Stuart's still around. He's working for Salesforce now, so it's. I can't keep track of it.
What was the name? What was the name of the other guy? got put retired. The original leader,
Original.
you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. I saw the kid retired. So I was thinking that maybe somebody else is.
Well, I think it's gonna be Don. Don worked, retired, but he's still around, he's still working. Kind of the ratio for the most part. And I don't really think Microsoft ought to be, Microsoft employees ought to necessarily be running user group.
Yeah, kind of surprised you. Do you guys have any questions? No, this one, thank you for.
All right, no problem at all. Thanks for
Glad
coming.
you're doing this again. This is
Yeah.
great.
I'm back next year. We're gonna have more people now.
I think the rate, the better with that.
Probably. The good thing about it is, Rob would have, for data center,
Two and a half
they
years.
did a lot of
I
that.
know survive, and now we're going to take 2.5 years to do it back.
No,
I think the better. So I'm pretty sure there's some stuff there. But it's.
Couple things.
Somebody was doing.
I'm not sure if you remember.
I didn't do anything.
Angela Trap came out to benchmark brands. Wanted you, this was probably like 6 years
A long,
ago.
long time
Yeah.
ago.
A long time ago.
No, I assume idea is, Red
Which is popular.
Well, thank you so much.
This was very.
Incidentally, we just did something very similar.
So benchmark too. So.
I did, yeah.
Did you use,
I was down on the BI
Yeah.
team, so I'm a more of a solutions architect,
But this, I can show them what.
and I don't know if you could really see this from here.
This is something you guys did?
Yeah, they call this an open to buy report, right? So it's got your sales forecast versus last, versus the budget, then there's the variance.
And how did you guys do it?
It's all, it's all
Nasty.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna.
nasty.
So they want to send us not only their budgets, but their monthly forecasts. And so
The old.
we were thinking, like, how are we going to continuously ingest this information? Because we'd have to design this whole process and doing it through a cube, like it never even.
Register, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
if they could do that, it cuts everything out. And they could just enter the information themselves.
And which company is that?
I'll check with them.
This is, what do you call
We
it?
can make her.
they sell furniture, high-end furniture.
Yeah,
Everything's at the product category level right now.
this solution actually doesn't have to be for planning and forecasting. It could be just for data entry. If you allow people from across the company to come in a single place and enter the data, if you found places this way kind of consolidates up, it's still useful actually. Planning and forecasting is just additional thing you can do on top of that. Right, so.
The writing back thing, I always told him like Power BI, why doesn't it have something like Excel to handle that type of thing? I think that would really,